You're listening to the Really Useful Podcast. This is the tech podcast for technophobes from makeuseof.com. Welcome to the show. My name is Christian Corley, and later on I will be joined by my colleagues Ben Stegner and Gavin Phillips, and I'll be presenting you a collection of tips and tricks that we haven't used previously on the show. This week we're going to go through a bit of news, then we've got the tips and tricks, and then that point in the show where we usually have the recommendation, I've got something slightly recommended, but also it's a bit of a rant, if I'm honest. It's a bit of a soapbox moment, but we'll get to that bit in a short while. The first thing we need to talk about today is Be Real and how Instagram is attempting to deal with it. Now, Be Real is a kind of a spontaneous social network app, essentially. It's an app that nudges users to share spontaneous snaps from their daily lives and is proving quite popular with Gen Z and millennial users, a group that Instagram is trying to increase its appeal for, which is why it's going to be attempting to copy Be Real. In an unoriginal twist, Instagram is testing a feature that mimics that core premise of Be Real. It's nothing new. Instagram has a habit of copying competitors. This time around, I mean, you can probably guess what's coming. It's a new feature called Candid Challenges. It's spotted by reverse engineer Alessandro Paluzzi. These challenges will send users a notification to share a photo on Instagram at a different time each day. Users will then have 2 minutes to capture and share a photo. Now, it might be that it is a little bit copycat, but it's a cool feature. And Be Real isn't something that older users like myself might be keen on using. I mean, I use Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp. And that's it. I don't use Snapchat. I don't use TikTok. TikTok's not for old people. TikTok's for kids, you know. So, and when I say kids, obviously I mean 16-year-olds to under 30s. I don't mean school-age children, because no school-age children should be on any social network, as I'm sure you would agree. Now, the Be Real-esque feature, if this happens, would bring Instagram closer to its photo sharing roots, which many users want to see. But it is another unoriginal feature that they're quote-unquote borrowing from elsewhere. I don't know what you think about it, but if I start getting Be Real-esque requests from Instagram, these candid challenges, I think I might give it a go, see what happens. It's very difficult to gauge how it might turn out, of course. I could be cooking, I could be shopping. Well, that's boring, isn't it? Who wants to see photos of people shopping? Well, there's an entire niche out there for that, so who knows? But anyway, so that's that. Now, slightly more serious news now. And Android users, beware. 35 apps may have infected millions of Android devices, and you really need to check your phone now. Security research firm Bitdefender, so this is one of the big guns, so we can take this pretty seriously, have discovered that 35 malicious apps with more than 2 million downloads combined are attempting to steal personal information and showing those goddamn unwanted ads on your phone. The apps are spread across a range of popular categories, from GPS apps to photo filters to wallpapers. They've racked up tens or even hundreds of thousands of downloads each and use a number of sneaky tactics to avoid identification. If you have them on your phone, you really do need to uninstall them now. Bitdefender reports that the apps hide their presence on the device by renaming themselves and changing their icon before they start serving these aggressive ads. Now, ads aren't uncommon among Android apps, but these particular apps use their own framework to serve them, which means they could also serve malware. Also means that they're difficult to deal with if you were to use such a thing as an ad blocker. Some of the apps may conceal their presence by changing their name and app icon after they've been installed. One example Bitdefender draws attention to is the app GPS Location, which changes its name to Settings in an attempt to make it harder to find. We've got a list of the full set of apps that you need to look for that are all available through the Play Store currently. You can install them in the usual way, as such. So we've got Walls Light Dash Wallpapers Pack, Big Emoji Dash Keyboard, Grad Wallpapers Dash 3D Backdrops, Engine Wallpapers Dash Live and 3D, Stock Wallpapers Dash 4K and HD, Effectmania Dash Photo Editor, Art Filter Dash Deep Photo Effect, Fast Emoji Keyboard, Create Sticker for WhatsApp, Math Solver Dash Camera Helper, Photo Pix Effects Dash Art Filter, LED Theme Dash Colorful Keyboard, Keyboard Dash Fun Emoji, Sticker, Smart Wi-Fi, My GPS Location, Image Warp Camera, Art Girls Wallpaper HD, Cat Simulator, Smart QR Creator, Colorize Old Photo, GPS Location Finder, Girls Art Wallpaper, Smart QR Scanner, GPS Location Apps, Volume Control, Secret Horoscope, Smart GPS Location, Animated Sticker Master, beg your pardon, Personality Charging Show, Sleep Sounds, QR Creator, Media Volume Slider, Secret Astrology, Colorize Photos, and Phi, that's PHI, 4K Wallpaper Dash Anime HD. For tips on how to minimize your risk of malware, check our link to that article in the show notes. There are many things you can do to avoid being affected by malicious apps. Check for any red flags before you download. Many of the apps here have large numbers of downloads and no reviews. That is a major red flag in any scenario, but particularly on Android. And you will notice from that list of titles I gave you, those app titles, they're all very similar and they're all clearly trying to hook a particular type of user who wants to achieve a particular outcome from their use of the app. So do tread carefully when using those apps. The next portion of the show will feature myself chatting with Ben Stegner and Gavin Phillips on a number of tech tips and tricks to help you make better use out of the gadgets in front of you. How do you cast from your phone to an Xbox One or Xbox Series X or Series S? You've got your phone in your hand and you want to share a video with gathered friends or family. There's no wireless streaming option on your TV. You don't have a Chromecast, you have no Fire TV, you just have an Xbox. Is there a way to cast to an Xbox console? Well, yes, there is. There's lots of ways, actually. There's a feature built into most Android phones that relies on Miracast. We don't really mention Miracast anymore because it's been folded into various other wireless HD streaming features. Samsung labels it Smart View. LG refers to wireless display. Sony calls it mirroring, and HTC, should you own a modern HTC device, and there are a handful abound, call it HTC Connect. And all you need to do is go to your settings or your quick launch menu and launch the app that does that whilst playing your video, and it should detect your Xbox and allow you to mirror the display. Now, what if you're using an iPhone? Well, AirPlay is built in, which enables instant streaming or mirroring from your device to an Xbox on the same network. You will need a third-party app. There's a couple available that are worth checking out. AirServer is $20. It is an expensive app, but it supports AirPlay, Miracast, and Google Cast, which means you can mirror iOS, macOS, Chromebook, Android, and even Windows 10. AirReceiver, on the other hand, is cheaper. It has a free trial, but it is limited to AirPlay and Google Cast. Now, if you just need to cast to your Xbox from your iPhone, that should do the trick. There's one other thing I'm going to talk about here, and that's how to cast to an Xbox using the YouTube app on your mobile device. Before you kick off with that, you need to make sure that the Xbox and your mobile device are both on the same network and you are signed into the same account on both devices. So signed into the YouTube app with the same account on both devices. Once you've done that on your phone, find your video, tap cast, and it will display the cast menu, and then you simply select the Xbox device in the list, and it should start playing through your TV via the Xbox console. It's as simple as that. There's a few more things that you can do, and they're explained further in the article in the show notes. But it's happy to see, I've just updated this, and I was pleased to see that very little has changed with this. It's still very simple to do.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing where it might work when a console first comes out, and then they say, oh, no, just kidding. And then in an update, they just pull that functionality, and then you're left out to dry, which stinks.
So well, when I first wrote it, I think I was using Android 8, and now we're up to Android 12, and it's still working in the phone side of things as well. So that's also good.
Yeah, I'm glad, because things like Miracast can be really hokey depending on which device you have and which TV. Like, it's kind of, the stars have to align for it all to work properly. So it's always nice. I've had many cases like that where it's like, I could use this, but I feel like it's not going to work because there's going to be some link in the chain that's not approved. So I've worried about that before. But yeah, that is a super nice option. And I like how you also mentioned the Xbox app in the article too, because that is really nice. That's if you have an Xbox, just like if you have a PlayStation or whatever, the official app is really nice just for installing games and remote streaming and things like that.
Now, what are the top 7 signs of a phishing scam? Now, a phishing email, that's the one that looks like a real email that then persuades you into clicking a link, putting your credentials in, and then someone controlling the server of that website then pinches your details and uses them on your behalf, only not on your behalf because you don't get anything from it. There are many fraudulent messages coming into email inboxes every day. Now, I have far too many email accounts. All of those email accounts have phishing messages coming in. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be using a email client or a web app that will catch phishing scams, then that's great because that reduces the incidence, but there's still going to be more that you're going to get. Most phishing scams take place via email, so you need to be vigilant about who you're communicating with, and that means checking the addresses of the people sending you emails. Often the addresses are absolute nonsense, and that's a key highlight. That's a key sign that is a phishing scam. So, for instance, it might be something that's spelled incorrectly. For instance, if I got an email off Gavin, Gavin's email address is gavin@makeuseof.com, and I don't think I'm giving anything away there, am I?
No.
And the make use of was spelled maybe with a 0 for of rather than an O. Then that would be a giveaway that is a fake email address and therefore not the real sender. Therefore, there's a scam involved here. Another sign is text errors in the body of the email. This might be grammatical errors, but these are glaring grammatical errors usually. You can use a spell checking tool to scan an email for errors, and that, if you find the errors, then again that's likely a phishing scam. That might just be an email from a child or someone who isn't that adept at writing or whatever. So you need to use a bit of common sense there. If it is someone you're expecting an email from and there's typos and grammatical errors in it, then that's probably just par for the course. Messages that claim to be urgent, they're often scams. Messages with urgent attachments, or beg your pardon, unusual attachments, they're almost certainly scams. No one you don't know should be sending you an email with an attachment. PDFs, JPEGs, CSVs, BMPs, docs, docx, XEs, VBS, WSF, CPL, CMD, just ignore those. And if it's something you are expecting, then that's okay. But make sure you're using a virus checker to check the link, check the downloaded file, beg your pardon. If it's an email that you're not expecting from a company that you don't have any business with or an individual you don't have any previous business with, then it is best deleted and ignored. Links in phishing scams are usually malicious, so use a link-checking website. There is a great link to link-checking websites in the article that we're discussing at the moment, and of course this article and everything else we've discussed in the Really Useful podcast this week you'll find in the show notes. If an email is asking for sensitive information, hit delete. There's no way anyone should be asking you for sensitive information through email. They either have it because you've already submitted a web form or filled out a paper form, or they're a scammer. And finally, your email provider flags an email as spam. It's almost certainly spam, so get rid of it, because it is not a genuine email. It is probably some kind of criminal enterprise, and you don't need it. Scams, phishing scams. Gavin, have you ever been caught?
I've never been caught, I must say, because I am so vigilant, Christian. No, I've thankfully never been caught. Actually, because I do follow most of the things written out on this list.
Yeah.
And having written about security for many years, you do look for all of these things. It just becomes kind of ingrained in you to check. I mean, this really is like the key set of things that everybody should do. Especially number one is just so important: the unusual sender address. When you go into Gmail, Outlook, Thunderbird, whatever email application you use, it will be able to show you the email address where the email is sent from. Whether it shows you it instantly, or you maybe need to hover over the sent bar or the from bar or whatever to bring up the actual address, that's going to be your key indicator as to where that email came from. If it says the email says, oh, we're from Amazon support and we need your information, it will say something like Amazon support 48129 upsilon hyphen blah blah blah, and you know that clearly Amazon are not going to be sending you an email from such a weird address. And more to the point, Amazon are never going to contact you directly anyway. That just doesn't happen. And that's the second biggest thing. Yeah. But for all of these big tech companies, that is the biggest thing. They're never contacting you first. You contact them first, and that gets the help process rolling normally. They're never emailing you to say, you have a problem with your account. Can we have your details? It doesn't work like that.
No, absolutely. We will conclude our tips and tricks with a look at Raspberry Pi projects for beginners. If you don't know what a Raspberry Pi project is, or if you don't know what a Raspberry Pi computer is, I should say, it's been around for around 10 years now. It's a compact credit card sized computer that you can do lots of things with, from building a media center to running your own space program. I jest not. There are many projects that you can use to get started with the Raspberry Pi. It also doubles as a standard computer as well. You could, if any of you work from home and you dial in to Citrix or any other sort of virtualization system like that, the Raspberry Pi can handle that. Certainly the Raspberry Pi 4 models, at least. It is an incredibly versatile little device. And it does a lot more besides. If you're just getting hold of one and you wanted to play around with some of its non-computing features, I've compiled a list of 10 things that you could do. The first thing, you could add a button to the Raspberry Pi, because incredibly, even now, 10 years later, the standard Raspberry Pi does not come with a power button. You could
just yank the cable out?
You can just yank the cable out, although because it has a micro SD card, it's safer to just type a command to shut down, so it does it safely. Otherwise, you end up corrupting your data. You can control LED lights with the Raspberry Pi. You can build a Pi-powered motion sensor and alarm. Now, you could use that in anger, as it were, as your own security system, or you could just use it as an appreciation of how such systems work. You can add any type of button to the Raspberry Pi. It doesn't have to be a power button. It could just be a button that's just does something. It has a collection of pins, an array of 40 pins called GPIO that controls all manner of things. And you can even use a Raspberry Pi to make your old non-wireless printer wireless. You can make music with a Raspberry Pi with a piece of software called Sonic Pi. You can build a network game server. You can host Minecraft games. You can host Quake games and many other types of games besides. With the Raspberry Pi 4 and the Raspberry Pi 400, which is basically a Raspberry Pi 4 inside a keyboard, you can connect dual 4K monitors. You can use a Raspberry Pi to build a cryptocurrency price ticker. In fact, it doesn't have to be cryptocurrency price ticker. It could be any currency price ticker
any kind of news ticker as well if you've got a suitable feed. And you can even give your Raspberry Pi its own display rather than plug it into HDMI using just an Android tablet, using virtual remote software, VNC software. So yeah, I mean, those are all basic things you can do with the Raspberry Pi. There's far more advanced things that you can do as well.
From time to time on the Really Useful Podcast, we like to share with you a recommendation. Now, I'm in the middle of reviewing a new dashcam, and it's come to my attention that dashcam manufacturers don't seem to appreciate the practical requirements of a dashcam. Some do, and some do it really well. Others don't. I'm looking at I'm looking at a 4K dashcam at the moment. I've installed it in my car, and it installs well and it appears to run well. The problem is that the cables are a bit of a pain. Now, there are several steps to installing a dashcam in your car. First, you check if the camera has an internal battery and charge it beforehand. You establish the best position for the dashcam. You compare this with access to the power supply, measure out your cable, then route and hide the cable. It's simple. But if dashcam manufacturers don't make it simple, then it can be a bit of a problem. Now, the issue I have with this dashcam is that it has a rear section, a rear camera, so there's double the routing of cables through the car. That's not the problem. The problem is with the cables. There are 2 ports on the top of the dashcam as it's mounted on the windscreen. One of these is an L-shaped USB Type-C cable. The other one is more of a standard data power cable. But it isn't L-shaped, and they're too close together. So thereby, you are forced to route the cables in a particular direction off the windscreen and then into the lining of your car's haberdashery. It's stupid. It's short-sighted. Either both cables should be L-shaped or both cables should be straight. Because of the distance between the 2 ports, having one being L-shaped and one being straight, or both being L-shaped, I suppose, in some ways, it's inconvenient. It's almost incompatible with keeping a dashcam mounted in a responsible way that keeps the cables out of the view sight of the driver. And I mean, there probably is another thing I need to complain about here, is the number of dashcams I've come across over the past few years that have stopped including a very important device, a clip, an adhesive clip. I can't remember. I mean, I must have reviewed 5 or 6 dashcams to make use of over the years, and I've had a bit of a break because I was doing so many of them. This is the first dashcam I've reviewed in a long time. And little adhesive clips for the wires to attach to your windscreen, again, for safety purposes, to keep the wires out of the view of the driver, or run them round the windscreen, whatever. If they're not included, then you've got an extra purchase to make before you can mount the dashcam. And given how important dashcams are to managing safety on the road, and useful for car insurance providers as well in apportioning blame correctly and helping with claims, having those wires carefully arranged so that they don't interfere with your line of view, your eyes, your sight as you drive, omitting them just seems short-sighted and stupid. Now, in this case, I picked up a bag of, I think, 50 clips for £5 or £6. Now, you might say, well, that's pretty inexpensive. I would argue, yes, that is pretty inexpensive. So why can't the dashcam manufacturers include, I don't know, half a dozen? That would do the trick. So I guess what I'm saying is dashcam manufacturers, design the ports on your cameras better, and don't forget the adhesive clips. Hashtag Dashcam Rant. Now, over the past few weeks, you may well have noticed that I have been largely alone in recording the Really Useful podcast, apart from the little clips that feature Ben and Gavin. Fortunately, normal service will be resumed next week, when I'll be joined by Gavin or Ben. We'll decide shortly, and bring you a Really Useful podcast full of completely 100% original material. Until then, please take the opportunity to share the podcast far and wide with whoever you think would benefit from what we've discussed in the show. If you know someone who would really need to know about casting to Xbox from their phone, for example, share it with them. And if you could give us a like and a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be absolutely marvellous too. And let us know that you've done that, and we'll read out your review. You can get in touch with us through the link on the on Facebook when the podcast is shared there, or contact myself or my co-hosts via Twitter. The links to us are in the show notes. Until next time, it's goodbye from us.